Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be going over exactly how to connect to the OpenAI API. Now, in our previous video, we went over the process of just how to write a really good prompt so that we can provide the inputs and our prompt and receive a really high quality and tailored response that meets our application use case and really meets the needs of our user. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see how we connect to that API, receive that response, that list of car options, and display it to the end user. Let's jump into this one. So right now, what you can see on the screen is the OpenAI API documentation. So this has all the information about exactly how to connect to their API. And if you go back to our previous module on API connections, this API reference documentation very much follows everything that we have covered in that module. Now, what I'm going to go over now is exactly how we can connect to the OpenAI API so that we can create this prompt response sort of format. So the endpoint that I want to go to is this chat endpoint over here. And I'm going to go to create a chat completion. And what this does is it creates a model response for a given chat conversation. So if I provide a prompt, then OpenAI provides me back with a response. Now, on the right-hand side here, I can see an example request, and then I can see all further details relating to this example request. Now, I'm going to do something a bit cheeky here, which is I'm going to go to here and I'm going to copy this example request. Now, there are two things that I've done before I've copied it. First, I've chosen the model that I want, which is 3.5 Turbo. There's other models available in the API, and you can choose the one that really fits your budget, your needs, and what you need really for your application. The other thing that I've chosen is I've chosen it to be provided in a curl format. The valuable thing for this is now if I go back to my Bubble application and if I go to my plugins, I can go to my API connector plugin and I can add another API, which is OpenAI. And then what I can do is I can actually delete this API call and I can click on this little button, which is import another call from curl over here. I'll then paste what I just copied and I'll click import. And what Bubble has done for me already is it's actually just created this call for me. So we can break down exactly what it's created. But first, what I want to do is I want to name this to chat completions. The valuable thing about using this import from curl is it really saves us time in setting up our API calls. It is important to note that it may not always import it correctly, and there are considerations that we need. For example, right now, what I need to do is I need to enter my OpenAI API key here. So it doesn't give you a complete call. You do need to still fill out and modify information as required. So the way that I'm going to get my OpenAI API key is I will go to platform.openai. And what this has here is I've logged into basically the developer portal. And if I go to the left-hand side, there is an API keys section, and I'll create a new secret key. And what I want to name this key is I want to go car recommendation app, and I'll create my secret key. I will copy this secret key. I'll go back to my application and I'll paste it in. Now what I want to do is I want to check private on both of these boxes. The reason why I want to check private is I don't want this information to be visible on the front end by the user. I don't want them to be able to view my private key and then potentially use that as well. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this one as an action as well. If I go down, I want to further just understand what is going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back over to my API documentation. And just going over this, we can see that we have the messages array, which is this one over here. And if I go over possible types, what the system message is it's basically just information for the system itself. So for OpenAI, the user message is what I'm more interested in, which is the prompt we are providing. So I'm going to jump back to here, and I'm just going to remove this one. The next thing that I do want to go over as well is I want to go over temperature. So the reason why I want temperature is I can adjust this value to change how random or how focused my response is. So what I want to do is I actually want to add this one in, and I will add it like so, and I will go 0.7 and I will put a comma. So what I want to do now is I want to test if this one works. So let me initialize this call, and I can see that the information is coming through as expected. So I sent through the message of hello, and it's given me a response of hello, how can I assist you today? So let me save this one. So what I want to do now is I actually want to have my prompt entered here instead of hello. So if I jump over to here where we have the prompt from our previous video, and I just copy this prompt in and I just paste it in like so to content, and I try to initialize my call, you can see here I get an error. And the reason why I get an error is because what it's telling me is that I have not provided valid JSON. And the reason why this was occurring is because we have a number of characters which aren't JSON safe, so to speak. So for example, within this text prompt that we've provided here, we have a number of characters like this colon. If I go over to here in this JSON format above, what you can see is that the colon is being used to show the difference between the key and the value over here. So a colon splits this key value pair. So because it is present in the text, the API is going, hey, the information that you're providing just isn't formatted in the correct way that we're expecting. Additionally, in JSON, we don't usually have enter spaces, and you can see that everything is provided on a new line like so. So instead of doing that, what we need to do is we need to make things JSON safe. And basically what that involves is adding special characters to account for the new line or for the colon. So instead of having a new line, what we might do is put a \n over here just to let the API know that, okay, this is actually on a new line. Now, it's quite annoying and difficult for us to do that over the course of the entire prompt text. So what makes our lives a lot easier is Bubble actually has a function which formats a text as JSON safe. So I've just changed this back to what it used to be, and I've reinitialized the call as well so that it's working as expected. The reason why I have done that is because all I need to do right now is just make sure that my call is working and that Bubble itself can read the response schema that it's receiving. What we will do in the future is we will populate our prompt in place of the hello in the content, but we will do that in our workflow when we're actually calling the API rather than here. What we want to do now is we actually want to start setting up how our call will work. And the way that we have this set up, if I go to my design tab over here, is we have a page where a user can provide in all their inputs and information. They can click the submit button over here, and then they get their car options. If I click on the edit workflow, we need to set up this workflow. So I'm not going to do it directly initially through this particular workflow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom event over here, and I will name it AI workflows. What I then want to do is I want to add a parameter being the prompt, and I want to add another parameter being output. And the reason why I'm creating this custom workflow is it allows me to make changes to my API call in one place. And just to give you a really clear example of why I do that, if I go OpenAI chat completions here, is just say I wanted to make a change to my API workflows and I have various different prompts. So just down here, what I'm actually going to enter here is dynamic data, which will be if I get this one to actually just add in, it's going to be dynamic data, which will be the prompt formatted as JSON safe. So any prompt that I provide to this custom workflow will be sent through this and provided in a JSON safe format. But just say if I decide to change my model to GPT-4o, I can change this in one place and it will automatically affect all of the prompts that I have set up. So it's really useful to use this custom workflow to route all your prompts through, because you can make changes in one place and everywhere that references this particular custom workflow will automatically be updated, for example, with a new model or a different temperature number. So you don't need to, if I had 5 or 6 different prompts on this page, I wouldn't need to jump into every workflow. All of them are being routed through this. Something I also do want to highlight is I want to remove these quotation marks around this particular prompt. And the reason why I'm actually doing that is because this prompt formatted as a JSON safe actually returns the information with quotation marks around it. So once it pulls in this text information, formats it as a JSON safe, it returns it in a format with the quotation marks already around it. So I don't need to have these quotation marks added in. Something I do want to highlight is that the way that we have set this up with just the body JSON object isn't actually the best practice of having the entire body here for us to be able to edit. What we actually want to do is we want to set up the dynamic values in the API connector itself. So to jump over to our plugins tab, instead of having the content as hello here, what I can do is I can write in prompt here, and then we can actually uncheck this box, and because we're going to provide the prompt in a JSON safe way, we can remove that one and we can go back to our workflow tab and we have the body prompt here. So instead of adjusting that entire JSON object, all I need to do is I need to just add in prompt formatted as JSON safe, and it will work just as expected. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to return the data, and the data I'm going to return is going to be result of step 1, choices, message content. So basically the response that I'm getting from OpenAI, we're going to return to this custom workflow. Now what we can actually do is we can set up what happens when we click the button submit. Now, before we jump into this, what I want to highlight is the way in which I'm going to be providing my prompt information. So I have my prompt over here and I don't want to provide it actually as text information to my workflow of prompt here. So if I go trigger a custom event, I don't want to just copy and paste my prompt in. What I actually want to do is I actually want to save my prompt in the database. So if I jump over here, I have a data type called prompt with prompt content as the text. And then if I jump over to my app data tab, I have all prompts, and then I have my prompt saved in here. The reason why I have done this is because by saving my prompt to the database, if I ever need to make changes because I want to update my prompt, all I need to do is I need to update my prompt content in my database here, just like so. So I can do that on my live database. If, however, I wasn't actually referring to my database for my prompts, and I actually had the prompt just written as text inside of this workflow, it would be hard coded in. So if I ever made any changes to it, then, so to give you an example, if I had arbitrary text and then I just copied this one and I'd paste it in here, if I ever then needed to make changes to this, then I would have to jump into my editor. I'd have to make changes to the text that I want to do. So I'd just be like, all right, I want to update this text over here. And then I would have to deploy my entire application to live again for these changes to be reflected on the right live environment. So putting in the database just gives me a bit more flexibility. Now, jumping back to my prompt over here, so you can see from the way that this prompt is set up, first we give the generative AI solution, so OpenAI, just an understanding of what kind of information we are going to provide it. We then tell it what kind of information or what deliverable it needs to provide us based on those inputs. And then over here, you can see these user inputs that we require. And what you notice here is that for every single one, we kind of have this placeholder value. And if I go to my design tab over here, you can see that all of these requirements are just added in as part of this design tab just here. Now, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to replace all these placeholder values with real values. The way that we do that is we have this plugin called Bulk Find and Replace, which is by Airdev. So if you just search for Bulk Find and Replace by Airdev, it comes up here. What we can do with that plugin is we have this option of bulk find and replace fixed. And what we do is we put in our original text, which will be do a search for prompt first item, prompt content. And then what I can do is I can grab each one of my user inputs, pop that in there, and then refer on the page to input budget's value. So I can do that for every single key value pair here. So now I've added this in for all of the key value pairs. What I have then done is once we find and replace the prompt information, we want to actually pass this to our custom workflow. So under prompt, we've set this to result of step one's replaced text. So it has the values that the user has actually input. What we then do is we then need to display that data on the page. So I have this group called display content. And inside of this group, we have this text, which just displays the parent group's text. And that group is set to type content of text. So we display that and then we scroll to that page. So let's see if this workflow and this API call is now working. So what we can do is we can add in our information. So I'll add that to 50,000, I'll add that to SUV. I will add in Mazda, I'll add in Porsche, and I'll add in Ford. I will update my usage purpose to for work. I will set this one to a hybrid. For key features, what I will write is I'm going to write very good heater. And the reason why is I once had a car that didn't have a heater and it was quite terrible in the winter. Then I will write nothing for the additional requirements and I'll click submit. So what I can see now is these car options are coming up. So it has a Ford Escape Hybrid, a Mazda CX-30 Hybrid, a Porsche hybrid as well, and we can see a number of different options. Something I do want to highlight, which I didn't quite like, is after we click the submit button, there was a bit of a pause before it was actually displayed on the page. So what I would like to do is when we click the submit button, I want to add a custom state called processing. And I'm going to make it a yes, no. And I'm going to add a conditional that when this button's processing is yes, the label is processing, and the element is not clickable. And then I'll just go set state of an element, and it'll be button submit processing yes, and then at the end we make this one's to no. So I can see when I click the button now, it goes to processing, and now it's gone back to submit and it's given me a number of options. So it's working as we expected.